Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness. Give your weight away today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.
Welcome to Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football, the show that each week will take you inside the games, the practices, and the interview rooms as we get ready for the upcoming Fighting Illini game. Hi, folks. I'm Matt Lovelace, coming to you from Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy, as we do every week, getting ready for the football show for Illinois football fans. We'll take a look at the big picture stuff in the Big Ten, across college football, and we'll take a look at today's kickoff with Penn State from a number of angles. And of course, as usual, we deflect most of the expertise to our panel. Steve Kelly from WDWS Radio, the voice of the Illini, Brian Barnhart, and Bob Osmussen, beat writer for the Champaign News-Gazette, talking about some of the big topics across football, and there were a lot of them this week, guys.
All right, well, thanks, Matt. And the Fighting Illini, of course, looking to bounce back after that loss last weekend, late Saturday night to Louisiana Tech. 52-24 was the final. And guys, that was a tough game for Illinois. The game at halftime appeared to be a game. Looked like we might have a good second half, but Louisiana Tech just kind of took over.
Yeah, 21-17 game at halftime, and Illinois came back and outscored them 10-0 in the second quarter after they put up 21 and unanswered points in the first quarter. And you thought, well, maybe this will be fun the second half, but it didn't take long, Bob, for that notion to change.
That was one of the uglier games I've seen Illinois play at home, really in the last decade. Think back to that Southern Cal game during the Lou Tepper era. There just haven't been many like this where the fans stream out of the stadium. That's always a bad sign. You don't want people leaving in the third quarter with no hope. And it was set up for Illinois to have a good game, and it just didn't work for whatever reason.
Well, if you're playing Georgia Tech, Louisiana Tech, anybody, any Tech, you commit 6 turnovers, you're basically not going to win the game.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's being overlooked a little bit. Obviously, Louisiana Tech played well, and they forced some of those turnovers. They did a good job, but Illinois still made the mistakes that really gave them the victory.
Well, Steve, we're looking at the Big Ten now, getting ready to start. As Coach Beckman has indicated, everybody's 0-0, which is true. But what have we learned about the league in the last month? I know nationally it's taken a hit, but what do you think?
I don't think it's as good as we thought it might be, and we'll find out now that they start beating each other up. I think maybe the two best teams play today. That's Michigan State and Ohio State. Those two teams, you got to figure Michigan in there in that conversation as well, but those two teams right out of the gate. Illinois has a chance to take a step up in the leaders division if they can knock off Penn State today, because that is a division game and you need to win those if you can.
Turning point game for Illinois, in my opinion. Win this game, like you said, they've got a leg up on everybody. They lose, real problem, given the next 2 games they're playing.
Another Big Ten story during the week also kind of involved Notre Dame. A week ago we were talking about Notre Dame going to the ACC. Now I guess after, 2014, they're not going to be playing Michigan anymore.
Why is that exactly? Those two need to play forever. I just don't understand.
Yeah, and it's not been an issue so far in college football, Steve, but refereeing was a big story this last week, to say the least.
I saw a replay or two from that one game, but yeah, knock on wood, it hasn't been a major issue in college football. Hopefully it doesn't, but mistakes are going to be made no matter who's refereeing, but that one was one that caught the attention, and it looks like the real refs will be back soon.
Yeah, we'll find out. But obviously, Illinois football is who we're talking about now. We're going to take a closer look at the Illinois game with Penn State coming up. Of course, the Nittany Lions coming off a very traumatic year with Joe Paterno and the whole scandal out east, and so certainly that has been a story. We'll get into all that as we continue in just a little bit, but for now, let's go back to Matt.
Hey, thank you, Brian. Yeah, Nittany Lions will be relieved. We're actually talking Penn State football today as opposed to all the off-field stuff. But next up, we have to talk Louisiana Tech, and we figured Louisiana Tech's offense would give the defense for the Illini some fits, but it turns out Illinois was their own worst enemy Saturday night. We recap the La Tech game next on Inside the Illini. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Now, if you come to our taping of the show, you have a great chance to win some tickets. A big thanks to one of our sponsors, our local Anheuser-Busch distributor, Skef Distributing. Each week, they'll send a couple of lucky fans who come to our taping Wednesdays at noon at Buffalo Wild Wings here in Savoy. The winner gets into a drawing for a couple of tickets, and we'll announce that winner coming up later in the show. Now, time to talk a little bit of Louisiana Tech. Now, early last week, Illinois receiver Ryan Langford had a quote. He said, if Louisiana Tech scores 50, we're just going to have to score 51. Little did he know. He was pretty close to right about one of those things, and it wasn't the right one, as our Central Illinois GMC dealers gives us our look in the rear view.
It started well for the Illini, forcing a punt, recovering a fumble, and scoring a touchdown in the first 5 minutes. But up 7-0, that tempoed offense of the Bulldogs found its groove. Colby Cameron hit DJ Banks for a 27-yard touchdown.
We've got to cover better. I mean, you saw it. A lot of play action that caught, you know, a one-on-one situation, which they ended up being successful doing.
Second play of the ensuing Illini possession, Nathan Shieldhouse was, as Coach Tim Beckman called it, rusty, and he's picked off.
The linebacker made a pretty good play, jumped the drive route, which we had been hitting earlier.
And the Bulldogs took just 43 seconds on the next one. The problems compounded. Shieldhouse fumbled on the next drive, and in a matter of less than 4 game minutes, La Tech punched in 3 touchdowns. Second quarter, the Illini got some momentum back after a field goal. Donovan Young scored from 1 yard out, and at halftime, it was a respectable 21-17.
Going into halftime, we had them where we wanted that, where we wanted them.
With what appeared to be the momentum, the Illini came out of the half and promptly gave up a 2-play, 81-yard touchdown drive. The first 6 of 24 put up by Louisiana Tech in the third quarter, making it 45-17 as they put the final 15 minutes on the clock.
Regardless of who you're playing, you're not going to win football games if you turn the ball over and give up big strikes.
And as if the coffin hadn't already been nailed shut, Cameron connected with Miles White for a 38-yard touchdown, and the Illini fell by a final 52-24.
It's a whole team effort. The defense didn't play well, the offense, special teams, you know, so we can't point any fingers. It's especially tough. It's at home from a home crowd.
For all the points they allowed, the number that bugged the Illini the most was 6. The amount of times they gave the ball away.
The turnovers, no question about it, and then giving up some long strikes in the passing game. You know, again, I credit Louisiana Tech. I think Louisiana Tech's got a good football team.
Well, Louisiana Tech came in and put up 52 points on the Fighting Illini at home Saturday night. As we mentioned earlier, guys, it looked like for a while it might be a pretty decent football game. I thought going in it might be a speed versus size kind of thing, and in a way it turned out that way. Louisiana Tech, very impressive.
Yeah, they were, and I thought, you know, for Illinois to win, they needed to score about 25 points. Well, unfortunately, they gave up 52, and you know, I think they gave up over 400 yards, gained about 324. It was kind of a weird game statistically when you look at it. Illinois, time of possession, they had that long 7-8 minute drive late in the first half. But, you know, Louisiana Tech scored so fast that, you know, they just weren't on the field very long.
Time of possession, bottom line, really doesn't mean anything. Unless you're a team like Georgia Tech, you know, runs a wishbone. Otherwise, it's not a big deal. Louisiana Tech is going to score fast. That's their deal. Now, how will that work when they play Texas A&M, when they play Virginia? I don't know, but watch and see how they do against those teams. Don't be at all surprised if they put up a big bunch of points against both those schools. And then you're going to be thinking, hey, maybe Illinois wasn't the problem there so much as Louisiana Tech's got a really nice team.
They are very good, there's no question.
I think if they beat Texas A&M a couple of weeks down the road, then they could be the Boise State of this year, the bracket buster, so to speak. They might be knocking on the door of thinking they ought to be in the title game if they run the table, because I don't see them losing if they get past Texas A&M.
No, they're not going to lose in their league. It doesn't look like. Question is quality of competition.
Right.
Obviously, Illinois is a decent team. A&M good, Virginia, but I don't know about the rest of them.
Well, and you know this, Bob, and Steve, covering football a long time, that those fifth-year seniors make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And they've got a lot of senior leadership. So, you know, that loss when we go back at the end of the year may, you know, wow, they were really good to begin with. But certainly Illinois did not help themselves with turnovers, mistakes. Injuries continue to be a problem. Hugh Thornton left that game halfway through, and they had to shuffle the line again.
Well, and the offensive line is one place that was thin to begin with. You know, if you looked at the beginning of the season where you could not afford to have any injuries, it was on the offensive line, and that's where they've had some. Graham Posick is expected to play today. Not sure what position, Whether he'll be back at center or at guard or at tackle, we'll find out soon enough. But that's the one position that really has been hit hard.
Maybe Graham will play two at once.
Maybe.
Guard and center, what the heck.
They might need his experience in there.
Well, and hopefully, Sonny maybe get back, and Steve Hall, who played briefly out at Arizona State, be good to get him back. But I know, talking to Tim Beckman, I know you guys did too before the season, Tim Beckman said, hey, the biggest concern I've got is depth. We don't have a lot of depth in a lot of key spots, and kind of his own worst nightmare has come through this first month.
And he loses Jarvis Fuller. They've got to get through that.
And they went to the running backs a little more last week in the passing routes, coming out of the backfield, as Josh Ferguson caught 10 passes in that ball game. That's another weapon, but they still need to get the wide receivers mixed back in my opinion.
Yeah, well, there's two things that have to happen. I mean, for one thing, you got to have some speed burners outside. And they've got some young guys that are developing, Justin Hardy and so forth. But you've got to have your quarterback have time to throw, no matter who it is, whether it's Nathan and Riley O'Toole has got a great arm, but he's got to have time to throw the football.
And one thing, besides the turnovers that affected them, the tackling, that's been a problem all year. They got a little better on that. I think only 8 missed tackles according to coaching stats. So that picked up, and we'll have to continue to do so. That's kind of a look back at that Louisiana Tech win. Matt, we'll throw it back to you.
Hey, thanks, guys. We're through the non-conference portion of the Big Ten schedule. We'll take a look at some of the highlights from Week 4. Plus, what does the Big Ten have to do to earn back a little bit of respect as we start Big Ten play here? We'll talk about it all next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Weekly MVP is brought to you by Shields, Gear, Passion, Sports. Each week we'll pick the most valuable Illini player, even in defeat. This week it goes to Josh Ferguson. Back on the field after sitting out a game with a concussion, Ferguson had 7 carries for 27 yards in the running game, but the tailback was the leading Illinois receiver. 10 catches for 84 yards, showing off his versatility for the Lights.
Hey, welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten football here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Time to talk Big Ten, specifically Leaders Division. Now, Illinois got the biggest thumping of any Big Ten team last week, but still some less than impressive performances from teams that should be winning convincingly. Our Eric Harrell takes a look at the highlights from Week 4.
Leaders Division, 16th ranked Ohio State taking on UAB. Trouble on special teams in the first quarter. Nick Adams returns it for UAB, puts them in the lead, first touchdown of the game. Urban Meyer's crew struggling, but Ohio State would get on the board. Braxton Miller in the red zone, takes a handoff, weaves through the defense. Touchdown Buckeyes. Buckeyes go up 14-12. They would extend that lead as Zach Boren rumbles into the end zone. Ohio State pads the lead, and they would go on to win this thing 29-15. They remain undefeated. Urban Meyer talked a little bit about where this program is at after the game.
I think by the end of the year, this might be a hell of a football team. I mean, it might be sooner than that. There's some people got to make some choices, and we got to do a better job in a lot of areas, and we got to get some young players experience, which we're doing. We're playing more freshmen than any school in America, and so sometimes that looks awful at times, but it's our job to coach them through that and get them to be sophomores real fast.
Wisconsin would have a scare in their game against UTEP as Monte Ball scores but pays the price, suffers an apparent head injury. He would not return to the game, but he has been cleared for this week's showdown against Nebraska. Wisconsin would go on to win against UTEP 37-26. They improved to 3-1. Elsewhere in the Leaders Division, Penn State gets back to 500 as they defeat Temple 24-13. The Boilermakers had the week off. They will return this week against Marshall. Indiana also had the week off. They will open their Big Ten schedule against undefeated Northwestern.
All right, let's take a look at the Leaders Division now. And guys, you've got teams, Ohio State, who cannot win this title because they're ineligible for postseason play, and Wisconsin, who was supposed to win it. Neither team has looked great. I mean, Ohio State's 4 straight home games to start, but they struggled with Cal, who might turn out to be pretty good, but they did struggle at home, and they didn't look great against UAB, and Wisconsin has just been kind of barely winning games.
To me, the big story is what is going on with Monte Ball, and I think we got to decide that Wisconsin's offensive line is not what it was. They lost some great players, and Monte is not getting the holes, and then he got banged up again, scored a touchdown, but he was out after that. They are not the same team without him. Obviously, they got some quarterback issues, but I think they might have got that solved with the redshirt freshman. So we'll see what happens with them, but they were very unimpressive against UTEP.
Well, and then they've got to go to Nebraska. And they thrashed Nebraska last year in Madison, so you know the Huskers are waiting for them.
And Nebraska leads the conference in passing offense, total offense. They're really, really good, especially at home. So we're going to talk more about that game as we move along. That's the one I'm going to pick a little bit later on. You know, Matt talked a little bit about the Big Ten getting respect back. I'm not sure it can be done now because they're playing each other.
Right.
And the next opportunity for that to happen will be in postseason bowl games. So now they're just going to they're going to mud it out against each other.
And those pairings don't always turn out very good for the Big Ten either. Playing some great SEC teams could be a real problem.
Well, and one team that's been playing really well this year has been Purdue. They haven't played great competition, but they have looked good in doing it. And Indiana's coming off a bye week, and they're coming off a stunning loss again, although it's becoming routine, it seems like, in recent years to Ball State. But Indiana goes to Northwestern, and they've got their quarterback now. His hip is better, Cameron Kaufman, and then Purdue facing a pretty good Marshall team in non-conference play.
And our resident Associated Press poller, Bob Osmussen, actually moved Northwestern up a little bit this week.
Yeah, I like the way they're playing. I think they'll beat Indiana. I don't think that'll be any kind of a problem. Got to watch Minnesota now, too.
Yeah,
Minnesota 4-0.
Yeah, of course, we'll get into them in the Legends division coming up. But anything else out of the leaders? I mean, obviously Penn State 2-2, Illinois 2-2. With Ohio State not being eligible, Wisconsin struggling, even though the Big Ten as a whole has struggled. This thing's wide open, I think.
It is wide open, and I think one of you said Purdue last week. I think we have to keep an eye on them because I think they've got all those little things you need to win a title, and this would be the kind of year they would win it.
One of the things we need to discuss, maybe not this week, maybe after we get a week of conference games in, just try to figure out who the top 5 teams in the league are overall. And I don't know you can do it quite yet, but you'd have to have, even though they can't play in the postseason, I think you have to have Ohio State, maybe the best team in the league right now. We'll find out more about them today when they play at Michigan State, but should be interesting a couple of weeks ahead.
And it's typical in Columbus and Buckeye Land, they're not happy with the way they're playing. They've played 4 straight home games. 4-0, but not good enough to this point. So that's it for the Leaders Division. Let's find out what Matt has for us.
Hey, thanks a lot, Brian. Now we're starting to talk a little bit of cross-divisional games. So we'll talk specifically about the Legends. We'll take a look at the highlights from last week. Plus, we'll talk about the blowout in Lincoln. Quite the game there as well. We'll show you the highlights next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Play of the Week is sponsored by our local Anheuser-Busch distributor, Skeff Distributing. The top play from the previous week's Illinois game, but Louisiana Tech had about all of them. In this one, La Tech QB Colby Cameron feeling the pressure. Watch him sling it, and Quentin Patton laying out for a sliding grab. That set up the Bulldogs' 3rd touchdown, part of a 6-catch, 164-yard day for Patton.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. We're here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy talking Big Ten Legends Division now, where the top-ranked team of the division is Michigan State, but they're at 18th, and they didn't exactly run away with a game that many people thought they should have last week. We go back to Eric Harold for the highlights from Week 4.
Legends Division, 11th ranked Notre Dame hosting number 18 Michigan. Second quarter, no score, 3 wide receivers to the right, Denard Robinson. Puts it in the air, throws it to the other team, Manti Te'o. He's going to bring it all the way back to the Michigan 17, Notre Dame in business. Irish up by a field goal in the second quarter. Everett Golson flushed out of the pocket, rolls right, still looking for the end zone, throws it, picked off by Michigan. Interceptions aplenty in this game. Denard Robinson threw 4 of them in the first half. Tommy Reese would come in relief of Golson. Right up the middle, touchdown Notre Dame, and Notre Dame wins one of the last Notre Dame-Michigan rivalry games, 13-6. The series will end after 2014. Head coach Brady Hoke shares his thoughts.
They've got to do what's right for Notre Dame, and they feel, getting out of the rivalry. Obviously, we kind of enjoy and cherish the rivalry, but we'll move forward.
Michigan State looking to get back on track after last week's loss, taking on Eastern Michigan. They would have a tough going early. Tyler Benz passes it to Donald Scott, leaping grab in the end zone. Big play by Eastern Michigan. They would lead this for much of the first half, but that would end as Andrew Maxwell finds Deion Sims in the corner of the end zone. Michigan State goes up 9-7, and Michigan State would go on to win 23-7. They improved to 3-1. Number 25, Nebraska welcomes Bo Pelini back to the sideline after last week's health scare, and he would see some fireworks. Taylor Martinez heaves it to the end zone. Quincy Enunwa, touchdown catch, 35 yards. That puts Nebraska up 21-0, and they would go on to shellac Idaho State 73-7. They improved to 3-1. Elsewhere in the Legends division, Iowa falls to 2-2, losing to Central Michigan 32-31. Northwestern remains undefeated, taking out South Dakota 38-7. And Minnesota also remains undefeated. They defeat Syracuse 17-10. Now, back to the Inside the Illini crew in Savoy.
The Big Ten has 4 teams at 4-0. 2 of those teams reside in the Legends division, Minnesota and Northwestern. We talked a little bit about Northwestern previous. How good is Minnesota, do you guys think?
You know, it's funny because we talked about Jerry Kill last week, and we've seen him do it at Southern and Northern. He just consistently, kind of quietly builds winners, and they're better on defense. They've had 11 sacks in their first 4 games. They've not been 5-0 since 2004. I know Glenn Mason got them off to good starts in some years, but they just seem to be a pretty solid team. Not great, but pretty good.
Really interesting game. Them going to Iowa. Iowa really blew the game last week. They have to win this game. So Minnesota is a real test. 5-0 would be very impressive for Jerry Kill.
They're playing for the old Floyd of Rosedale trophy.
Pig, right?
Yeah, big pig trophy. That's the first trophy of many in the Big Ten, as we'll see in the weeks ahead. I think Minnesota might go in there and beat them, but like you say, Iowa, it's a must-win for Iowa.
Oh, yeah. I think so. Yeah,
for Ferentz, I don't think he's got an idea what's going on. They're not getting great offense. They're not getting great defense. It's a real mess.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of penalties that first week, but then they had 9 last week and a loss to Central Michigan. So they're undefeated. And then, of course, you mentioned Northwestern. They've been running the ball more lately. I mean, Venrick Mark is averaging about 100 yards a ball game, and they've had 3 wins against 3 BCS teams. I don't know how many teams have done that in the country, but they've been kind of quietly effective too.
And Nebraska last week puts up 73 points. You can't take much out of that, but they'll be tough at home against Wisconsin. How good is Nebraska? They're 3-1. We'll have to wait and see, but they've got a tough one today.
Well, of course, and Michigan went 11-2 last year, was in the Sugar Bowl. They're off this week, but now they're asking questions. I mean, they beat a team they should beat in Massachusetts a couple of weeks ago, but hammered by Alabama, couldn't score, didn't get a touchdown, last week against Notre Dame, and so they've just been struggling and too many turnovers, and that's another question mark now for a team that was pretty highly thought of.
Yeah, well, when we get around to doing that, who's in the top 5 of the Big Ten? Michigan might be, 5, 6. Again, it's kind of early to do that, but they're a team, and I'm sure they're wrestling us up in the big house.
And Michigan, a lot of us picked them to win that particular division. They may still wind up with it, but right now, with the teams with the confidence, or the Minnesotas and Northwesterns, we'll see what happens when we get into actual league play today.
Michigan just 2-2 in the league. Iowa, we mentioned, also not in the league, but overall, as we begin league play. Iowa with that same record, and Michigan State sitting in there at 3-1 as they host the Ohio State Buckeyes today up at Spartan Stadium. That should be a good one.
And they've had some classic games between those two, but they haven't, Ohio State hasn't been there in about 4 years because of the scheduling. And Michigan State, they're kind of questioning themselves a little bit too. Too many drop passes. I think they've dropped 13 in the last 2 weeks. And Mark D'Antonio and his team heard some boos last week when they were trailing their opponent Eastern Michigan at half.
That's a look at the Legends division. We'll throw it back to Matt.
Hey, thank you guys. Next up, we have our latest installment of Illini in the Pros, and a big topic here, the NFL debut of Michael Ashore. We'll look at that next on Inside the Illini.
The Inside the Illini Gem of the Week is brought to you by Ray Eldridge Jewelry. Elegance without the attitude in Peoria and Decatur. An SEC battle between South Carolina and Missouri, and one of the great punt returns you'll see this season. SC's Ace Sanders on the return, bounces off his own guy, escapes, then look, he's wrapped up, escapes that, and then flat out runs the rest, and a big win for South Carolina.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Time to take a look at Illini in the Pros. Now, of course, the big story from Week 3 of the NFL didn't really have anything to do with the players on the field, but for some Illini fans, a huge return to playing football came on the field for the Detroit Lions. Our Noah Newman takes a look in our latest installment of Illini in the Pros.
Good morning, Matt. Week 3 was one to remember for a former Illini running back. Champaign native Michael Ashore suited up for his first ever regular season game with the Lions and boy did he deliver, rushing for 100 yards and scoring his first career touchdown. Detroit finally got to see what they traded up for 17 months ago in the second round of the 2011 NFL Draft. LaShore missed his entire rookie season with a torn Achilles. Then he was suspended the first 2 games of this season for violating the league's substance abuse policy. So it's been a long road back, and his offensive line and head coach are excited to finally see what he can do.
We liked him an awful lot when we drafted him. We moved back up to get him. You know, we've been waiting to get him on the field for a long time. He's a multi-dimensional back. He's not just a power runner inside, which he can do. He can make guys miss. He's good in the pass game. He's a smart guy. You know, we say all the time in the draft, it's about finding a good match for what role we're asking. It's also about, you know, acquiring talent. And Mikel fits what we want. He also is a talented player.
Potential is unreal. You know, the way he looks in practice, I think he's awesome, you know, but, you know, show me. You know what I'm saying? I want to see. I want to see for myself. You know, I'm sure he's excited to show us. So, he's a good player. You know, I want to see him be good. I want to see him be great.
Veteran wide receiver Brandon Lloyd is another former Illini coming off a big day. He surpassed the 100-yard mark for the first time this season, but in a losing effort as the Ravens kicked a late field goal to get the win. So Lloyd and LaShore, 2 of many former Illini making noise in the pros. I'm Noah Newman. Back to you guys in Savoy.
Well, we've been waiting quite a while for former Champaign Centennial star and then former Illini Mikel LaShore to make his NFL debut. He missed the first couple of games, and boy, did he show up big this last week. He
had 100 yards even on 26 carries, also caught 4 passes for 34 yards, scored a touchdown as well. And I'm surprised a little bit, Bob, that they went to him that often in his debut.
But I think they've always thought he could be the guy, and I think he proved it. He's going to keep getting the ball. If you're in a fantasy league, pick him up.
Well, I think it's an easy pickup, and boy, you know, we saw him develop over his time in Champaign and how forceful a runner and how much of a battering ram he kind of became. So not surprised he got off to a good start.
Yes, maybe fans around the country are thinking, what's going on in Illinois? You've got Mikel LaShore, who reminds a lot of people perhaps of Richard Mendenhall, who reminds the people of Pierre Thomas, and that position has been pretty good. All in all, last week, 19 former Illini played on Sunday, and the other times that the games were played. 21 receptions, 31 carries, 10 tackles for former Illini. Dave Deal did not play. He missed the game with that knee injury. Richard Mendenhall still hasn't played yet this year, but we're anxious to see him come back.
And you followed recruiting all these years, Bob. I mean, Ron Turner, Ron Zook, those are all guys that played for those 2 coaches at Illinois.
Yeah, some of those guys highly recruited. David Deal, not highly recruited. John Asamoah having a great career in Kansas City, not highly recruited. So it shows you don't really know. 5 stars, 2 stars, it can be the same.
Yeah, I mean the stars, coaches will tell you all the time, they are looking for something, certain things. I mean, obviously the 5 stars, everybody gets focused on them, but there's guys playing in the NFL like a Dave Deal who didn't even play at Illinois that much the first couple of years and moved around a lot on the offensive line. Now look at him.
And Brandon Lloyd quickly becoming Tom Brady's favorite target. He had 9 more receptions, 108 yards last week.
Yeah, certainly so. So a good week for former Illini in the NFL, and hopefully that will continue. And hopefully all the referee stuff will be straightened out. We can talk about football in the NFL in the weeks ahead. Let's go back to Matt.
Hey, thank you, Brian. One would hope that referee stuff will die down here hopefully sooner than later. Now up next, Eastern Illinois has had some pretty exciting games, and last week was certainly no exception. We'll take a look as we go inside the Panthers on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini. We take our weekly trip to Charleston, where Eastern Illinois found themselves in another exciting overtime game, this time coming down to a gutsy 2-point conversion attempt. Lots of excitement down at Chucktown these days. We go inside the Panthers with Eastern Illinois University.
Eastern Illinois and Illinois State have played 100 times prior to last Saturday's clash in Normal. The 101st matchup between the Panthers and the Redbirds may have had the most drama. ISU got on the board first, late in the first quarter on a pick 6 of Jimmy Garoppolo. The Panthers tied the game just before the end of the quarter with the first of 3 touchdowns for Taylor Duncan. Duncan powered his way to pay dirt in the middle of the second quarter to give EIU a 14-7 lead. ISU tied the game on the first of 5 touchdown passes for Matt Brown. The first half scoring was kept off by a career-long field goal by Panther place kicker Cameron Barra from 44 yards, 17-14 Panthers at the end of the half. EIU extended their lead in the third quarter on a touchdown pass from Garoppolo to Eric Laura. However, the Redbirds found the end zone twice to end the third quarter on top, 28-24. Eric Laura started off the fourth quarter with another touchdown reception, and then Jake Walker bruised his way for another score, and EIU led 38-28 with 9 minutes left in the fourth. The Redbirds found the end zone twice in the final 5 minutes of the quarter to retake the lead 41-38. Jimmy Garoppolo led EIU down the field in the final seconds of the quarter, and Cameron Barra hit another field goal at the buzzer. The 20-yarder sends the game to overtime. The Redbirds scored a touchdown to open the first overtime. The Panthers forced a second overtime on Taylor Duncan's third score of the day. In the second OT, the Panthers offense came up short, and OVC Special Teams Player of the Week, Cameron Barra, connected on a 40-yard field goal. ISU capitalized on their offensive possession in the second OT.
We're disappointed we didn't get 7. I mean, we had a wide receiver opened, and you know, he gets tackled on the 3-yard line. We really thought we were going to go down and score a touchdown and win the game. And I really feel bad. I really felt bad. We probably should have went for 2. That's my fault. Probably should have went for 2 after the first one just ended the game. You know, that's how good I felt about what we were doing on offense. So I'll take the blame for that.
Despite the heartbreaking loss to the Redbirds, EIU head coach Dino Babers likes where the team is going into the conference opener against Murray State.
We're a really good offense. We special teams, I thought, bounced back from the Western Michigan game. I feel that we had some opportunities to make some plays out there, and we didn't. We battled with a 15th ranked team in the country with 19 BCS transfers, where we only have 2. And I thought they fought well for the state, Central State of Illinois, and it's disappointing that they lost.
2 up-tempo offenses. It's going to be fun, and you know, our defense is going to have to come up big for us. I mean, what I think it's going to come down to, I mean, 2 offensive, yeah, they're going to be highlighted by like the media and whatnot, but I think again it's going to come down to defense, to what our defense can be capable of.
The Panthers and Racers' up-tempo offenses will duel under the lights at O'Brien Field in Charleston. Kickoff is set for 6:30 p.m. on Saturday night. Reporting on the Eastern Illinois Panthers for Inside the Illini, I'm Ryan Snodgrass of WEIU TV.
Thanks to Eastern Illinois for that coverage of the Panthers. Now, coming up next, we'll make our picks. We'll take a look at our standings, and we'll take a look at some of the big matchups coming up this week in college football. That's next on Inside the Illini here from Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Hey folks, welcome back to Inside the Illini here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. I've joined the table of experts for our Healthy Choice Pick'em, brought to you by Physicians Choice Wellness. Give away your weight today. Now, each week we'll make our picks. PCW will give us $1,500 to give to a charity of our choice for the winner. And we have to take a look at the standings. Brian,
we don't have
look
to.
Away.
Yeah.
3-1. A few 3-1s. I got my pick. ASU beat Utah pretty convincingly. Notre Dame beating Michigan was Steve's pick. He's 3-1. Bob at 3-1 with that Florida State pick. But Brian, Kansas State, Oklahoma. Kansas State's a pretty good team. So as we're seeing that evolve over the few weeks, so I'm sorry about that. But we'll make our picks. You know what? I picked Arizona State, and I was looking down the list of games that were expected to be close, and I'm letting it ride. I'm picking Arizona State again. They're at Cal this week, and I was a little bit surprised to see them 2-point underdogs at Cal. We've seen Cal play a couple of pretty decent games. They played Ohio State pretty well, and then they played USC last week, and you know, a three-score game, but not too terrible. But what I've seen from Arizona State so far this year, we saw them firsthand. They're a pretty good team. I expect them to win even on the road.
I'm going to go with the Wisconsin at Nebraska game. Monty Hall a little bit banged up. He's not been playing that well. Even before he was hurt, he's getting about 90 yards a game. But Nebraska put up 73 last week. They won't score that many on the Badgers, but I think Wisconsin falls in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's a tough place to play, tough crowd, tough game right out of the gate for the Badgers. I'll go with the Cornhuskers.
Well, guys, I know that in college football there's only a handful of games, so if I'm already 2 games behind everybody, this is like an elimination game. I better pick right on this one. Baylor at West Virginia. First of all, I'm trying to figure out how West Virginia's in the Big 12. But they are. First Big 12 game for them. They have a Heisman candidate at quarterback in Geno Smith, who's an outstanding quarterback. 12 touchdowns, no interceptions. Baylor runs a very high-powered attack. Their defense somewhat suspect, giving up 492 yards a game. And this was a stat for me that will help me pick West Virginia to win. Baylor 0-25 all time against ranked teams on the road. Now, granted, they weren't very good a lot of years, but they are a good team. Nick Florence has come in for RG3, done very well, but this could be a shootout. But I think West Virginia wins it over Baylor at home.
I'm going to go with a road team. I like Texas at Oklahoma State. Mac Brown's got that thing back in line. They're not playing like Texas last year or the year before. They're really rolling. I think they're going to have a great season. And I like David Ash against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State defensively, brutal. They went to Arizona, just got crushed. So I really like the Longhorns. We'll see if the road team can come through for me.
A lot of road teams in this one this week. We'll take a look at those standings coming up next week. Now, this is a segment where we'd like you to get involved. Go on Facebook, ask us a question for a chance to win a $25 Buffalo Wild Wing gift card. This week our question comes from Troy Kester. He asked, this is a good one, how much bad blood do you guys expect between two teams on Saturday, given what happened during the summer? Now, Troy, of course, referring to Illinois going to Penn State, not exactly going on campus, but recruiting some players and figuring out if anybody wanted to transfer. Steve, what do you think? What's your opinion?
I don't think it'll have any effect on this game. I think once the game starts, it's a football game. I think really about everybody, at least on this end, had forgotten about it until some Pennsylvania writers brought it up earlier this week. And yeah, Ryan Nowicki did come from Penn State to Illinois. He's not even on the depth chart, so he's probably not going to play in the game. So I don't think it's that big a factor.
Yeah, and it sounded like O'Brien, the coach, was trying to downplay it a little bit too. I know Tim Beckman certainly was, and I think there may have been some initial hard feelings at the Big Ten meetings when that first story kind of broke. But yeah, right, Nowicki has not been a factor yet. Although it was interesting in the press conference to hear all those Pennsylvania writers from Harrisburg and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. That was the first thing they brought up. So they're obviously thinking about it a little bit.
Are the Penn State players mad at Southern Cal? Are they mad at Texas? Are they mad at every other school that took a player? I don't understand this. I really don't. The rules were set out. I don't think Tim Beckman did anything wrong. I don't think Illinois did anything wrong. I think the Penn State people are blowing this way out of proportion.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the writers and it's some fans that are upset about it. As far as bad blood goes, I don't think Bill O'Brien is upset anymore. He just wants to play football.
Yeah. Well, this too shall pass.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Troy, for the question. We'll get in contact with you for your Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. And thanks for the segue, because we're actually going to talk some Penn State football for a change. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, our final segment, talking some Penn State. Now, they came out a little sluggish this year, an 0-2 start. We imagine that might have something to do with a little bit of off-season trouble, but since then, the Nittany Lions have actually gotten progressively better. 2-2 ahead of this morning's kickoff with Illinois. Our O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana weekly preview takes a look at Penn State.
The Nittany Lions seem to be working things out. After a disappointing start, they've notched a couple wins and are back to 500, entering their first full Big Ten schedule post-Joe Paterno.
I think Coach O'Brien's done a great job with that program, and you can see how they've progressed each and every week.
You could tell they're just trying to find out about themselves a little bit in that first game, and have definitely started to find their swagger.
Senior quarterback Matt McGloin is having his best statistical year. His numbers are solid, completing just under 60% of his passes in 4 games, topping 1,000 yards with 9 touchdowns.
Seeing him do a lot of play action, so that gives us, our edge guys, a chance to rush the quarterback a little bit more.
A pass-heavy offense isn't what we're used to seeing from Penn State, but with 4 guys that have at least 20 carries this year, the Illini say they expect a heavy dose of the run.
As I look at them last year, they still, at least particularly against Illinois, the game looked very, very familiar to what they're doing right now, in terms of being multiple, running the ball, play action pass, and throwing it downfield.
While the talk around Champaign has been more X's and O's, we found out this week another off-season development is still the focus in State College. You may remember a side effect of the scandal that rocked Happy Valley. Penn State players were allowed to transfer without penalty. The most notable, Silas Redd, who's immediately become the top rusher at Southern Cal. There were 8 others, including freshman offensive lineman Ryan Nowicki, now with the Illini. In fact, he's the only player to land at another Big Ten school. and apparently it's still a sore subject.
Does that bother you at all that a conference team came in and did that?
It takes a lot to bother me. So I would tell you that, again, our players, myself, our staff, we're very focused on the task at hand.
I regret that it ended up being this much and it's still talked about, but it did give a young man the opportunity to make his decision on what he wanted to do.
But with kickoff minutes away, it's not likely the recruitment of Ryan Nowicki is going to be a driving force for either team. What will? A couple of 2-2 squads that are eager to start fresh in the conference season.
Well, like I said, finally time to talk a little bit of Penn State football. I know a team that Coach Beckman, as he put it, that has gotten progressively better as the weeks have gone on. It's kind of like they figured themselves out, what kind of personnel they have. Obviously, with all the trouble in the offseason, what's your impression of how they've evolved over the first 4 weeks?
I think at the beginning of the season, they didn't know what to expect out at Happy Valley, and that probably contributed to those 2 losses early to Ohio University and Virginia. But I think that, I'm like you, I think they found themselves a little bit. It's more of an NFL-style offense, Brian, than we've seen coming out of Happy Valley, although Tim Banks told me earlier in the week that he watched, of course he wasn't here last year, but he said he watched the Illinois-Penn State game, and he saw him doing a lot of the same kind of things, although I think it's a little more wide open with Bill O'Brien as the head coach.
Think about it, they're 2-2 right now, but how close they are to being 4-0. They led Ohio at the half, 14-3, didn't score in the second half. If they just hit one of those 4 field goals at Virginia, they win the ball game. Of course, the young man missed the extra point, or had it blocked, and then missed the field goal at the end of the game. They really rolled over Navy. Allen Robinson, a huge game, and then they played well last week in beating Temple, a team they kind of struggled to beat the year before.
This is still a team that has been decimated roster-wise. Okay, they don't have Silas Red, they don't have their kicker, punter. They've lost a lot of people, and I think a lot of what's happened with them the last 2 weeks is the opponents. I think Ohio's a lot better than anybody they played. I think Virginia's a little bit better than Temple and Navy. So I don't know that Penn State is fixed. I think people think they are. I'm not sure they are.
And we talked about their passing attack. The reason it looks a little different is because Matt McGloin's actually having a pretty good year, putting up some solid numbers, not eye-popping, but he's been able to distribute to some receivers, and McGloin and Allen Robinson, that sophomore, Brian, you mentioned, he's got something like 400 yards through the first 4 games.
Yeah, something appears to be clicking with McGloin. He's got 6 career interceptions, 5 of them came in the bowl game. So he's only had 1 since then, so he's picking something up from Bill O'Brien, and I'll be anxious to see how different they might look.
And I'll be interested too, because 2 years ago, of course, we played Penn State, Illinois did back-to-back years in Happy Valley because of the addition of Nebraska, the juggling of the schedule. But last year's game was in that snowstorm, Joe Paterno's last game, and Dimke hit the upright in the snow, where the game would have been in overtime, and who knows. So, Penn State's defense still very good. Their offense coming around with McGloin, and this is not a gimme for Illinois, no question.
Matt McGloin does not scare me, though. That's the main thing. I mean, he's okay, he's serviceable, but he's not a great quarterback. And so if you get to him early, you can really cause Penn State a lot of trouble.
Well, I'm interested to get your guys' take as well, because a lot of talk has been about the kickers. Brian, you mentioned it last year. Penn State's kicker missed those 4 field goals. If this game comes down to kicking, I know Nick Imicus is out with an injury for the Illini. Any concerns that this game might come down to a leg?
Sure, that can always happen. Yeah, I'm going back to last year's game a minute. All 3 of us were there in the snowstorm in that 10-7 game. And little did we know what was going to happen beginning the next week.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that would have been Joe Paterno's last game, and then everything else that's happened in that 12-month period. It's amazing.
It was almost an omen. Weird stuff was about to happen because we're getting snow like crazy during that game.
Any chance there'll be some snow this week?
No.
I doubt it, no.
Yeah,
Not quite yet.
Yeah. Well, and of course, talk a little bit about the Illini and the things they need to fix. Now, ask Coach Beckman after the game. In their couple of wins, they've given up, there were a couple of losses, they've given up 48.5 points a game. In their 2 wins, they've given up 3.5 points a game. So I asked Coach Beckman, feast or famine, can you really explain what's going on? And he goes, can't. That was about the extent of his answer. I think what we've seen, though, is maybe these offenses that can do multiple things really give Illinois fits.
This offense will be different than those 2.
Right, exactly.
So maybe that's a good thing for the Illinois defense.
Penn State is not scoring 48.5 points.
Right.
That's the one thing I will promise you. Right. If they do score 48.5 points, Illinois might want to shut the season down, but I don't think that's going to happen.
And the one thing, though, Penn State has done in all the games is gotten off to quick starts. They've outscored their opponents 55-9 in the first half of games this year and 35-0 in the first quarter. So they haven't gotten off to good starts.
Do we expect a more of a 10-7 game again, something in that low-scoring range?
Yeah, 17-14, something like that. I think it'll be in that range.
Yeah. Well, it's going to help me as a play-by-play guy to not have to keep talking fast. I mean, maybe it'll slow down a little bit so we can keep up with it.
You improve your skills, so it's good.
That's right, absolutely. All right, hey, well, folks, thanks for watching today. We, before we go, of course, want to announce the winner of our ticket giveaway. That's Sherry Saylor out of Decatur. Sherry gets 2 tickets to the game. 11 o'clock kickoff. That's coming up. Enjoy it. Coming up later today. We'll see you back here next week on Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football.
Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness, give away your weight today. And Buffalo Wild Wings, Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.